We're going to go on a journey back in time to the very beginnings of Oxford Castle. The year is 1071. It's 5 years since 1066 and the Norman ships began arriving on the south coast of England, and the army of William, Duke of Normandy, defeated Harold II at the Battle of Hastings. William was crowned King of England, but his reign would never be a peaceful one. The years that followed were full of violence and turmoil as the conqueror's troops set out to crush rebellion and bring the English to heel. The new king's strategy was brutally efficient. He began to transfer political power over whole regions, away from the native aristocracy and into the hands of Norman nobles. Each was granted a piece of land and entrusted with the task of building a castle. The castles that they built were simple structures of mounded earth and timber. They were to serve as strongholds for launching Norman war parties, and as a potent warning to the English that the Normans meant business. Oxford in the 11th century was a rapidly growing Saxon town occupying a crucial strategic position at a ford across the Thames. William couldn't run the risk of it falling into the wrong hands. The task of securing it fell to a minor Norman nobleman called Robert D'Oyley. D'Oyley had fought alongside William in several campaigns and distinguished himself at Hastings. This was his reward, the chance to become the most powerful man in Oxfordshire. He grasped it with both hands and threw himself into building a castle that would leave the natives in no doubt as to who now ruled the roost in Oxford. And this is what he built. I'm standing on the motte, or earthen mound, of the Norman castle. Now, from a reference in the annals of Osney Abbey, we know that it was constructed in 1071. On top of the motte, D'Oyley first built a timber tower. This he replaced with a stone keep 2 years later in 1073, when the whole castle was rebuilt in stone. Surrounding the foot of the motte there was a ditch, and beyond that, overlooked by the castle keep, was the bailey, a large defensive enclosure where the daily life of the castle carried on. This too was originally built in timber and later rebuilt in stone. The finishing touch was a moat filled with water from the castle mill stream. The earth excavated from the moat and the ditch were used to make up the mound that you see today. Finally, there were some ramparts made of earth, covered in a layer of slippery clay, so that anyone attempting to storm the castle would be in for a very hard time indeed. Motte and Bailey castles were a Norman speciality. They were relatively easy to build and easy to defend, and over 70 were created during William's reign as King of England. But not everything about the castle is Norman. To explain, we need to go back to before the Norman conquest and imagine ourselves in Saxon Oxford. Try to put the modern city out of your mind. Set aside the dreaming spires because the university won't come into existence for another 2 centuries. Picture instead a small but prosperous town of a few hundred houses set at a river crossing in the middle of a damp and misty floodplain. The town was well defended on 3 sides by the natural barriers of rivers and marshes. A man-made line of defence was provided by a ring of walls and ditches that surrounded the town, with a gate at each of the 4 points of the compass. At vulnerable places like these, there was a tower to offer a vantage point over the surrounding countryside. An exciting revelation that came about during the present-day renovation of the castle was that St George's Tower, the building you're in now, probably originated as the tower guarding the western gate. The Saxon defences were found to run much further west than anyone had suspected, right up to the base of the tower. This, together with other factors like the mismatch between the tower and other stone towers known to date from the later Middle Ages, have led archaeologists to the conclusion that St George's Tower was already standing when the Normans arrived in Oxford. So one of the major parts of the castle is likely to be Saxon. That makes it unique and one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries of recent years. Is it perhaps the earliest standing tower in Oxford? The debate will be heated. The heyday of Oxford Castle was the Middle Ages. Twice it played a defining role in national events. During the 12th century, Matilda, who was the first woman ruler of England, was besieged inside the castle by her cousin Stephen, who had a rival claim to the throne. According to legend, she made her escape from the tower, fleeing through the snow dressed in white. Early in the 13th century, England was in a state of civil war, and Oxford Castle was defended for the crown against the barons who'd risen in arms against King John. Over the centuries, though, the defensive role of Oxford Castle did gradually diminish, and it was used more and more as a jail. The dungeons of Oxford Castle, for hundreds of years, would be feared and loathed far beyond the city walls. The castle was probably used for imprisoning people from at least the mid-12th century, but it wasn't formally constituted as a county jail until much later in 1531. By then, most of the buildings associated with the defensive role of the castle had fallen into ruin. The castle hall had become the county court, and it was here in the late 16th century that one of the most famous events in the castle's history took place, the Black Assizes. A Roman Catholic bookseller called Roland Jenks was tried before the court in 1577 for his papist views. At his trial, he pronounced a curse on the court and jury. Shortly afterwards, people who'd been in the court that day began to drop dead of a mysterious illness. The victims included 2 judges, the coroner, the sheriff, and many jury members. Around 300 people died in all. The court proceedings became known as the Black Assizes. Catholic contemporaries interpreted the mysterious illness as God's judgment on Protestants. Protestants interpreted it as a wicked Catholic plot. And modern archaeologists tend to interpret it as an outbreak of typhus. You can decide for yourself. There's now very little left of the medieval castle, or at least little left above ground. The exception is the building that you're standing in now, St George's Tower. For centuries, it's been this tantalising landmark on the Oxford skyline, marooned out of public reach inside one of Her Majesty's prisons. Its main use in recent times was for the pumping of water. 2 large storage tanks are positioned here, high up in the tower. The water was drawn up from the prison mill by a capstan in this room. The capstan was installed in the 19th century and operated by prison labour. If you look down at the floorboards, you'll see something remarkable. Decades of prisoners' feet trudging round and round have worn circular ruts in the timbers. It's a reminder that the history of Oxford Castle is made up of hundreds of untold human stories, belonging to all the people who've lived, worked, fought, served and suffered here. As the castle enters its second millennium by opening to the public for the first time, those stories are at last beginning to be heard.